This is Van Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air with Rebecca Whitman. Do you want to be called Rebecca Elizabeth Whitman or Rebecca Whitman?
Rebecca Whitman.
Thank you. 'Cause I know your website has your full name, but
Yes.
thank you for being on the podcast. And want to let people know this is a featured podcast on the Newsly platform. You'll see that running below. If you use coupon code GHOST, you'll be able to get 1 month free premium subscription on that platform. And we will be on Newsly later tonight. That's an audio podcast platform. So, and as again, we are a featured platform on that podcast on that platform. So, thank you for being on the show tonight, and for letting everybody know that we're gonna let everybody know this episode is actually, I believe we're at 946. So this is 946 of the Fan Electric Ghost podcast, tracking out on Apple Podcast. Since we started there, we actually had podcasts before we were there, but that's where we are according to them. But thank you again for being on the show tonight.
You are so welcome. I'm excited to be episode 946. 946 in the house.
Well, it's just fun to be out here. We've been doing this again since 2016, and one of the things we want to talk about today, the topic that we have is how to be resilient, which I think a lot of people can benefit from. Because one of the things, like in your byline, you transforming women from being burned out to being balanced, beautiful, and abundant, and how to be resilient. I think that's a very positive thing. And no matter what kind of walk of life, or whether you're a woman or a man, learning how to be resilient is a thing that artists, we run into it all the time, because like not everything we do works. How many songs we write, we have hundreds in the can, and like one of them goes through. So if you were thinking everything was going to go through, you got to be resilient, or you would stop.
That's right. Yes, resilience is really important in life. And to me, resilience is, there are going to be ups and downs in life, but resilience is how fast you bounce back. Like, how long do you stay down before you start coming back?
Yeah, I think it's like your recovery time. Like,
Yes.
again, like if you're an athlete, you might be, trying to win that game, or you're trying to win that race, and then you come in fifth or you don't win. And like, how do you bounce back and realize that you're not going to win everything, but it's a lesson learned. I'm a software designer. Every time we do something, we have these sessions called lesson learned sessions about the things that we didn't expect, or things that we didn't consider. And so we've kind of realized in our world of being software design that it's never perfect, that we continually it's in a mode of continuous improvement, and we know that we can't be perfect. And it's kind of cool to have that mindset, because then you don't have the weight of trying to be perfect, knowing that you have a day two, you have a day three, you can recover.
Yeah. I mean, having that freedom of expression, I like to say there is no failure. I either win or I learn, and knowing that if you fail big and fail fast, you're actually getting closer to getting the result you want. So I think it's so important in art and in business, just not being scared of failure. Like, I like to ask people, what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail?
Yeah, I don't think you go forward. As a musician, everything we do, a lot of what we do as a producer, I go for happy accidents, and I know there's a lot of people that try to do perfection, but I'm a child of the '70s. I'm 55, and I remember when bands used to just go and just put the record on and just play, and a lot of the stuff I like, from Frank Zappa and Neil Young, was the result of bands just playing to a reel to reel and letting it be, and going with very early takes, even though they're not perfect. And the idea is that that imperfection is actually beautiful, and actually trying to make it better sometimes destroys it. Trying to
Yeah.
make it perfect actually takes away from the art. And you kind of like a painter that says, well, those are the brush strokes that I left. That's what it is. I could have kept on going, but that's a point in time. That's what it is.
Nobody falls in love with someone who's perfect. People fall in love with you for your vulnerability, for your flaws, for your authenticity. And I think that's true with art, your personal brand, your business. Just people want someone who's being real and raw.
Yeah, it's like the whole authentic self
Yes,
versus kind of this like manufactured self. And there's so
exactly.
many things today where you can clone and you could use AI or you could use this or you can sample or you can cut and paste things around. But is that really you or are you trying to be somebody else? You know,
Yeah.
and I think like one of the things I want to talk about is your concept of the seven pillars of abundance. And
Mhm.
I think it's some common strokes, in terms of ideas that work for people. But I want to understand what are those seven pillars?
Yeah, it's funny, Phantom, because I too am an artist. I moved to LA 22 years ago to pursue my dream, childhood dream of being an actress. And I had small parts on hit shows like Friends, CSI, and 24. And while I was pursuing acting, I found myself working at children's acting studios, which I really enjoy because I don't have kids. And that gave me a lot of free time during the day because I couldn't, teach the kids until they were out of school. So during the day, I attended spiritual lectures with amazing teachers like Michael Beckwith, Abraham Hicks, Louise Hay, Wayne Dyer, Marianne Williamson, just to name a few. And I really understood the law of attraction. I applied it to my life with a lot of success. I was making six figures working part time. The one area that I felt stuck in was my romantic life. I kept choosing emotionally unavailable, narcissistic men, and I ended up marrying one. And 3 years later, I filed for divorce. And as my marriage was painfully unraveling, my dad was declining in a nursing home. And in one of our last conversations, he asked me if I would write a book. And I said, I will, but I have no idea what to write. So a few months later, my dad has passed, my marriage has dissolved, and I'm sitting across the desk from my financial planner. And he said, Rebecca, you've lost your dad in your marriage, yet you come in here with good energy, and you're actually having your best fiscal year ever because of your investments. You're a millionaire. And I think you should write a book and teach people what you did. So I looked at my life and I looked at why was I so resilient? And I realized that I did not put all my effort and energy into my romantic life alone. I was looking at life holistically in these seven key areas: spirituality, fitness, emotions, romance, mental, social, and financial. And when you live all areas of life and you have them in alignment, you are balanced, beautiful, and abundant. And now I coach women to go from burned out and overwhelmed to balanced, beautiful, and abundant. And that's the name of my podcast, The Balanced, Beautiful, and Abundant Show.
I think that's a really awesome way to look at things. Can you, my the way learned in college, as I was the Socratic method, I went to a school called Bowdoin
I would
College,
do it.
and it was kind of this. It was more blue book, open question, kind of show the professor that you actually learned the lesson not through multiple choice, but you could actually put it back in your own words what you learned. If you learned philosophy, if you took constitutional law, whatever you took, that you had to not just do a multiple choice, you had to give it back to the professor in a written form or an oral form. And I think that Socratic method is a kind of concept of holistic thinking.
Yeah.
And
And
yeah,
a
I
lot of
mean,
people don't learn that anymore.
no, because they're kind of going for very, very kind of narrow, very, and that's just one of the things I ran into in my life is because I am not a comp sci major, but I've been in software design for 27 years, and I don't have a degree in computer science. But how
Mhm.
do I succeed in a six-figure job in software design? Is because I look at things as a continual learning experience, and I'm what they call business system analyst. I look
Mhm.
at the business problem. I talk to business people and I talk to programmers. And I happen to have a technical capability to understand the programmer and to understand that business person and then come up with the translation of what they want and then provide multiple options of what it could be,
Mhm.
regardless of whether their technology could be, is these are the things that they want to do. These are the use cases. And I put that out there and then the programmers figured out what language to put it in, but I come up with the logic of how it should work. And that doesn't necessarily mean you have to know how to code. And so it became a really cool thing that you could be very creative. And my kind of music brain helps a lot with this because I look as like, why can't you do that? And I'm not thinking about what you can do technically. I'm just thinking about like that makes sense to me logically. So why can't you do it?
Yeah, I love it. You're doing what I teach my clients. I say, don't quit your job, get a side hustle, and have multiple income streams. So that's exactly what you're doing, and you're a multi-passionate entrepreneur, just like me.
Yeah, because I think what happens is like, you do your passion, part of what keeps me alive is the fact that I love music, not because I'm trying to make $1 million from music, but because I love it. And I've been playing it since I was 17 and I'm 55. And then I happen to get opportunities because I'm passionate about it. And because I'll
Yes.
do it whether I make money or not. I'll write a song just because the way it's cathartic for me. It's like
Yeah.
art therapy. And then the podcast became something somebody just found me, back in 2016, this guy named Rock Tunes. He came up to me, he came out of nowhere, found my SoundCloud and said, "Hey, I want to interview you. You got some interesting songs." With first interview we did, then we decided, hey, we like each other so much, let's do a podcast. It wasn't anything I planned to do. I was just open to the opportunity, and I say, hey, why not continue to do this? So after he wasn't able to do the podcast, I just started to do podcast with emerging and independent artists, and just asked them, do you want to get interviewed? And I just started asking people, do you want to get interviewed? And I found out I created a pitch over time, and I, was able to build up. It was only on the phone, and now it's video. But it wasn't. It was like I had to be willing to like this unforeseen opportunity that came into my lap. I didn't even really think about it, and then I took it and went with it. And some people, if you're too narrow, you'll never see that.
Yeah, it's so funny because I started a podcast. I was at a business seminar, and the coach gave us a challenge at lunch to get out of our comfort zone. She said, invite 3 people that you really respect and that intimidate you a little bit to be on your podcast. And I invited 3, and one said yes. And I was like, oh boy, I better figure out how to have a podcast because I just got my first guest and it's someone I really respect. So that's how my podcast started. So I think it's about just remaining open minded and open hearted and being receptive to unexpected good, because we don't know where our good's going to come from and where our next opportunity is going to come from. We, when I have an open mind and an open heart, I attract way more fun and unexpected opportunities.
Yeah, I find that sometimes when people are looking for like their soulmate and they're trying to find some kind of winning formula, a lot of times they're so anxious and they're so kind of like, well, if you're, it's like this idea of like I work with sound and, I'm a sound designer. And if I make a sound wave that's very frenetic, right, it's kind of like a punk rock song, it's very agitated. Then the people that it's going to attract are kind of very agitated and, it's not maybe not be a very calming experience, not like listening to ambient music. So if you're kind of got a personality and you're radiating this kind of anxiety, you're probably not going to find somebody that's going to link with you. You kind of got to find that inner peace. You've got to kind of not be looking for it. And then it comes to you. That's why I find that like if you just get calm and you kind of meditate, whatever practice you have, but you kind of find that peace within yourself and start being happy about, just satisfying your inner child and not being scared to do it, then things happen. People come to you. It starts to happen. And people, oh, that's magical. And like, no, it's kind of like you are still doing something to make that happen.
Yeah, that's why I call myself the magnetic abundance mentor. So I teach people how to raise their vibration and use the law of attraction to manifest their wildest dreams. And it's work for me. After that divorce, I ended up married to my soulmate, and we got married on 12/21/21 at 12:21 p.m. And I love alignment, and that is what I love teaching women how to do, is how to manifest their abundance, their soulmate, everything good through the law of attraction, which doesn't burn them out because they don't have to like push and grind to get results. They can just kind of relax and work on, instead of always working, just focus on changing their thoughts from negative to positive.
So it's like in the idea of finding your soulmate. I think a lot of people feel kind of tortured about it. They put themselves through all these things. They speed date. They do this. They do it. They go into these trends, and then it's like maybe that's not going to fit you. It fits some other paradigm. Somebody might be trying to make money, but it's like, does it really fit where you are? Like, are you really addressing the issue? Like, if you keep on finding the same person, it's probably because you haven't addressed the issue that you have, right? That you're not gonna, that somebody's not gonna save you. At least from my perspective, like sometimes people are looking for somebody to save them, and my opinion is like, don't you have to save yourself first?
I agree. I mean, that's codependency. That's like the Jerry Maguire movie, you know, when he says to Renee Zellweger, "You complete me." Nobody can make you whole and complete except you and your higher power, whatever you choose to call that, universe, God, Allah, Buddha, doesn't matter, Jesus. But no one person can do that for you. So I like to say the goal is not codependence, but interdependence. Two fully actualized human beings who feel whole, perfect, and complete unto themselves. They come together with another fully actualized human being, and then the sum is greater than the individual parts when you have two people that are individuals and not codependent. So yeah, I agree. I do believe in soulmates. I believe that there are more than one. I don't think there's just the one out there for everyone. I feel like people could find many people that are compatible, and there's many kinds of soulmates. You know, I just had a soulmate dog. You can have a soulmate best friend, you can have a soulmate child or parent. Like it's not just romantic love that where
Yeah.
you have a soulmate. A soulmate is just someone that you've connected with in previous lifetimes and you feel like a very deep connection.
Sometimes like your best friend is your soulmate. I've got a friend from like, when I was in elementary school that we kind of, we're two guys that we were into music, and we write our own music, and he's a lawyer and I'm this, but we talk to each other 4 or 5 times a week, and we know each other from playing Legos together. Is this something that is a connection that's like there?
That's
And so,
beautiful.
yeah, I mean, that's the kind of thing I believe in. That I'm a practicing Buddhist. I'm a Nichiren Daishonin Buddhist, and the idea of like the law of cause and effect and things like that. And I lived in Japan for 2 years, so I had the whole experience, and that type of Buddhism actually came from Japan. But one of the things I find is the idea of falling in love. I actually kind of addressed it in some of my music. I kind of thought, it's like, isn't that kind of negative? Why do you have to fall? So I actually wrote a poem, and then I turned it into a song called Ascending into like this darling mode. And I actually called it Ascending into Darling Mode. I made an album. And the idea was like love isn't falling. You should be like ascending together, and there's not one person over. It's like complete, it's this interconnected, not opposite of codependence. That it shouldn't make you feel like you're falling. You should make you feel like you're rising.
That's a
Like
good
more.
point. I do think there's an aspect of surrender, though, of letting go of control, because when you are meeting someone and you're very connected, you're like, oh my God, what's going to happen? I'm thinking about this person more often than I want to. Like, that's where I think the falling means, but you can surrender to your ascension, like just letting
Mhm.
go of control. And I think that is why a lot of people are not falling in love or ascending to love, as you say, because they are not willing to surrender control. They're so worried about getting their heart broken. They've put up so many walls that it's impossible for them to fall in love.
Yeah, I think that they kind of like surrendering to something that's positive. And not because you could surrender to somebody that's kind of top down, and then putting you in that codependency. And some people might think that's love. And a lot of times in the past, if I look at like some of my grandparents and, older generation, the idea of love in their minds is like, sometimes it was very top down. It's very kind of like not, not having equal partners, not being able to, have a equal say or be able to do what you want, being expected to be in a certain role and not really being fulfilled. And then say, well, that's the marriage. That's what it should be. And I'm
Well,
like,
yeah, I agree. The concept of a power couple is a new thing. Women used to get married for food and shelter, and men would get married for sexual and emotional stability. And now it's different because women can provide for their own food and shelter. So it's both people get to be enhanced on different levels, mentally, spiritually, physically. And there are still some, traditional marriages out there where, the man is the provider and the woman is the housewife and the homemaker. But I think more and more we're seeing the paradigm shift to power couples where both people can make money and both people are bringing different things to the table than just the basic, transaction. I'll give you
yeah,
this if you give me that.
yeah, the idea, like, my mom was a not that there's anything wrong, but she was a homemaker
Yeah.
and she didn't really have a career. There are things that she wanted to do, but she kind of had three boys and she was there. And that was a different world. And we were middle class. And it's like, she had aspirations to do more, but that was the kind of mindset and everybody she had came from a big family with five other sisters, and they all kind of were in that paradigm. When like nobody, all the men were the providers, and that was the kind of mindset. But like once everybody started going to college, the kids went to college, and then the daughters and the sons, we all started to go, and people were like, well, some of us are lawyers or doctors or scientists, and we don't want to not be a scientist and just I'm going to give up being a scientist. I'm going to give up being a doctor just because I got to play that role because my mom played that role. Yeah, that's not happening now. It's like I'm going to get to be who I wanted to be, and there's nothing wrong with that. I should be able to continue to have my goal.
Yeah, I mean, women used to feel like they had to choose either a career or kids, marriage or success, and now it's different. Thank God, it's both and. And to me, true feminism is a woman can choose. If she still wants to be a happy homemaker, then that's great. That's her choice. But there's no pressure either way. There's no pressure for a woman to have a career, and there's no pressure for a woman to stay at home.
Mhm.
Having choice is true empowerment.
And then the idea of being burned out, I've run into like even with musicians, because we can kind of put ourselves in a situation where in order to make money in the music world, you have to tour.
Mm,
In order to tour, you might have managers that put you in a situation that will burn you out. They'll
mm,
put you on tour for 2 years, and then you don't have any kind of freedom. You're doing it because you're trying to break, but
mm.
it's like it breaks you. It's like because you're not giving yourself enough space, but you're feeling like you're obligated. And so I can see like in the kind of parallel is like if you put yourself into one of those jobs, you're pulling in a 90-hour week. You're not coming home. You're a road warrior. You're not seeing it. You don't ever get to go home. You're living in hotels. You think that that's what you have to do. And I think the pandemic kind of showed people like maybe that's not what you have to do. And now you can actually treat work from home. You don't have to be on the road. You don't have to be that road warrior. You don't have to be touring like that. You can do something else.
I agree. I think the pandemic changed everything. People can still burn out at home if they like overschedule themselves on Zooms and do too many projects. But yeah, you don't have to at least grind it out as a road warrior, touring or being a traveling salesperson and being on the highways all day. Everything can be done now from your home computer with a good Wi-Fi signal. And then you need to learn kind of my philosophy, because it's easy if you're a type A overachiever. It's just as easy to burn out at home post pandemic as it was pre pandemic.
Yeah, yeah, you can overschedule. Well, we find like even in software, is we found that we actually do more hours at home than we did when we were on the road. Because when we started asking people how many hours you actually pulling in, 12, 14. And when they were on the road, they were doing like, 6 and then 4 were on the road. 4 hours like within the Uber and in the plane and, driving to the place, but actually 6 hours actually working, but a bunch of hours of traveling. Now you actually got 12 hours of actually working. And you're like, wow, it's like you need to balance that out because we actually start saying like you need to take a break because they get this like diminishing returns that we used to see back even in the 80s. The guys would just sit in their cubicle and think they got to sit there for 6 hours coding. And it's like, you're not getting any better doing that. You need to kind of walk away and come back because your quality of your code is not based on how many hours you sit in the cubicle. It's whether or not you're looking at it with an open mind and have it taking a break or walking away sometimes gives you a better point of view.
Yeah, your mind needs a break, and your mind is a muscle, and we get to, have a break and integrate. I really love the Pomodoro method, which studied the human mind, and they found that it can concentrate very well for 20 to 25 minutes. And then the brain wants a 5-minute break. So I actually use the timer on my phone. I'll do like a 25-minute sprint, focus on something, then take a 5-minute break, get up, stretch, go to the bathroom, pet my dog, open my door, look outside at the sun, and then go back into it. And then there's another thing I teach people to do called power hours. So I could do two 25-minute sprints within a power hour. That's 50 minutes on, 10 minutes off. And I'm more productive that way than just, go, go, go and burning my mind out.
Yeah, it's definitely there's something to that because even some people get into this. I kind of try to do these things I call stream of consciousness um, style writing sessions, and I've seen like writers do it when they kind of just open notebook and just let it go. And well, instead of just sitting at the computer and trying to go on the grid and do the bars, make everything perfect, you just kind of go at it from like I'm just gonna do whatever comes out the top of my head, whatever I'm playing on piano, just record it, then come back and listen to it. What I find there is you tend to get something that feels very authentic, very real, and it's unexpected because you trust yourself. You don't keep on stopping and starting and stopping and starting. You kind of let yourself go and let your subconscious kind of get out there and map it out. And it's kind of like if you go to a poetry slam and you have people do free form off the cuff poetry. And sometimes it was like the poet's like, wow, this is really good. We need to record it because it's better than what I'm trying to sit there and really try to eke it out. And it's like if I let myself trust myself because I know I'm a creative person, kind of let it go and see what happens.
Yeah, because you're channeling when you're just like in flow state and you're whatever, writing a song, writing a book, doesn't matter, doing poetry. When you just get your personality out of the way, you start channeling and stuff just starts flowing through you. And it's so beautiful. Some of the most popular pop songs ever written were just scratched on a napkin in like 5 minutes. You can see them at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It's amazing.
Yeah, that's what you find when you start reading the biographies of like the idols you have. You go back and you look at what Neil Young and Dylan and all these guys did. A lot of it is really like they just did it off the cuff. They just like rolled the tape and then like whatever came out their mouth. That wasn't some big thing they really thought about. It was like what was in their heart. And they went back and they tried to do something better. And they went back and say, hey, that third take is actually better than the 20th, where I started to overthink it and then I wrecked it. And then they go back and say, there's this kind of rule, like Elton John was talking about it on a Yellow Brick Road. There's a documentary. And he said back in the 70s when he did Yellow Brick Road, he said everything's like third, fourth take. And nowadays we do hundreds of takes. And he said it really felt better when we could take that third or fourth take, because that's what those songs are. And if you listen to that stuff from the 70s, it's like that feels better. It sounds better.
I love the music from the 70s and 80s because it told a story. It wasn't just all about like TNA and like
Yeah.
mating calls and sex. Like, yes, like sex is an important part of life, but there's a lot more to write music about than just sex.
Yeah, it was the age of the singer-songwriter where, I always looked at them as like they're like, authors. Like the classic singer songwriter puts you into like a sound painting, into a sound movie.
Yeah, they
But
change
when
your
you
state.
Yeah, because I mean that's the way they wrote. They wrote it where these are actually stories, and
Mhm.
when I listen to the Carpenters, like I can feel these things. And James Taylor, we listen to bands like Yes and stuff. The stuff that was coming out, they didn't feel like, oh, it's got to be 2 minutes. No, sometimes it's 18 minutes.
Yeah,
Sometimes it's 7 minutes. It's 5 minutes. It's whatever it was that fit the song. Like whatever the song needs, that's what it is. It doesn't have to fit this formula. That,
right.
oh, it's got to be this formula. That's what the kids want. It's like, yeah, fine. There was some of that, but people were allowed to do things that would break the rules. And I'm a big fan of like, why are there are rules to certain things, but like why not challenge it? I was watching Orson Welles, and they asked him about Citizen Kane, and he was saying, I didn't know what I was doing. I just felt like I just wanted to do something, and I didn't know what I couldn't do. So I did things that people said later. It's like, well, no one ever did that. No one ever filmed shots like that. It's like, well, I didn't know you couldn't do that, so I just did it.
Yeah,
I was like,
be a disruptor. I mean, that is a success principle right there. If you are a disruptor, you can be extremely successful. If you look at like Uber was a disruptor to the cab industry, and Airbnb was a disruptor to the hotel industry, and Amazon was a disruptor to the big box retail store. So being a disruptor, I think, is part of what's changing the world right now.
even like Apple, like the computer doesn't have to be like the IBM. Like that you could actually have a different form, that you could go into things. It's like, I remember when the Apple showed up and it was so much different than a PC. And I was like, wow, like it seemed more artistic. I mean, it seemed more like an artist looked at it instead of just an engineer looking at it. It was a combination of an artist and an engineer having a conversation, saying doesn't have to be utilitarian. It can have some style. It can
Yeah.
have, and so then they opened up the whole world. It's like, yeah, you don't necessarily have to do it from this utilitarian point of view. You can have some kind of like, looking at it like, classic design of like why do you get a Ferrari? Because it's art and it's design, because it's the shape has a lot more to do with it. And it's like, well, why does it have to be that? Because it's an artistic point of view.
Yeah, exactly. There's a beauty, art, work, that is when you're living the balanced, beautiful, and abundant life where they're all the same thing. You're not a certain way at work and a certain way at play and a certain way in your passion project and a certain way with your friends and a certain way with your lover. Like it's about living a holistic life and just being yourself and showing up as yourself and expressing as yourself in all the different areas of life.
So you have this question is like, why should you keep your job and find a side hustle? And I totally believe in that. That's what I've done. Um, and I just wonder your point of view, because some people think, oh, like, well, if I'm going to be an artist, I got to give up my day job and I got to go try to be like a starving artist and put myself out there. And I've always been to the point of view, like I can do my art and I can still have I can still have my job, and it's like my art and my podcast are my side hustles, and they can kind of coexist. And it makes me feel like a complete person without stressing me out.
Yeah, a lot of business coaches will tell their clients, to max out your credit cards and quit your job. And you got to put yourself in a do or die situation. And then you're going to be forced to be successful. But to me, that's very stressful. That is totally fear based thinking. And most people will not be attracted to your energy. You want to come from contribution, not desperation. And it's such a competitive marketplace right now. If people can sense any kind of fear or desperation, they are going to be really turned off. And think about it, when we were in grade school, we would have those three ring binders with 5 sections. We have math, science, English, and history. We could handle doing 4 or 5 things. So people think I just have to do one thing, but I don't think that's true. If you are good at time management and you have different passions, why not do more than one thing? And I tell people don't quit your job because that's paying your insurance. It's paying for your bills, and you can use the extra money you make from your job to invest in your side hustle because business takes money to get off the ground. There are expenses. So there's no need to quit your job. You can either keep your job and quit it when your side hustle starts making a comfortable income, or you can have multiple income streams. The average millionaire has 7 to 10 income streams. So why not have a few?
Yeah, that's what makes sense to me. That was the whole point. Like I because I first, I got into it and it's like, well, I got to buy a Moog. How am I going to buy a Moog if I just give it my job? Like, how am
Yeah.
I going to buy my Roland keyboard? How am I going to buy this, mic? And so the whole idea was like, why not? And the thing is that what I do is very creative. My software job is still kind of creative. It's not mind numbing to me. It's fun. And
Yeah.
so I said, well, why not just have that as a good basis? So I have healthcare, I have retirement, I have that, I have passion, but I'm a consultant. So I have some leeway that if
Yeah.
I want to tour, I can stop and then I can come back. And so it's not like a full time, but so it gave me kind of this thing where it's what I want to do. It still has like the ability that I can do it all the time, or I can do it like I could do it part time and go tour it and come back and go ramp up to full time. So I think people just have to look at what is comfortable instead of stressing themselves out. And I saw young people I was around when I was first a musician, and they went stressed and then they gave up. Now they don't do it anymore. Where I've been continually playing music since I was 17, I didn't stop. So I think it had a cost where they got burned out.
Yeah, and I think most people want a hybrid. They don't want a job where they have to clock in and clock out and have a boss breathing down their neck. People really fell in love with having autonomy during the pandemic. And if you have a job like you have, and I have a similar one that has some flexibility, there are times where you can just focus more on your job if you need to really make a lot of money and have a steady paycheck. And there are other times where you can put more energy, like in your situation, going on tour. I'm an actress. If I book a movie, I can put more effort into my creativity.
Yeah, I think it's just like you don't have to put yourself on that razor edge, which I think a lot of people think it's like a very romantic thing, you know, to kind of get it's like, oh, I'm going to be like, go to CBGBs and live that Ramones life. I'm going to be a punker and I'm going to be out there and we on the edge. And yeah, some people feel like that's what they have to do. And I mean, I was a radio guy and I used to, deal with a lot of the indie bands. They felt like they had to be like the sub pop bands. They felt like they got to do that. But,
They romanticize it. I understand it. And there is some romance to it when you're in your 20s and you don't have any like bills or anything. But once you get over like 35, it's not so romantic to be poor.
yeah,
And CBGB's closed. So
yeah,
that that fantasy of living that punk rock lifestyle is gone. And I think even, people in their 20s that are listening to this podcast, they are all having multiple income streams too. So I think that's just the way to go. And that is what is happening. People don't just want to, it's boring also. Even if you love what you do, it makes your life more exciting to have different people and flex different facets of your mind and your personality.
yeah, because you can kind of integrate. Because people was like, well, how could you integrate being an artist with being a software designer? But it's like, Apple did it. Like, a lot of things going on today with the very forward thinking, enterprises are starting to realize that bringing creatives, like being the artist, the painter type of people, the people who are poets and musicians, that they actually bring a lot of good ideas in. And I've actually, been in meetings where we selected people who are kind of artists, and there were people saying, "Oh, we don't want to bring that kind of person. We need somebody heads down." And I'm like, I fought for them to be brought in, and then they it's like, wow, that was a really good decision because they've been able to move the enterprise forward because they didn't think they would because they wanted them to be kind of cookie cutter, and they didn't think that that type of person would do it. And I'm like trying to expand the palette, of like, you don't just think you need one type of person.
Yeah. And also when you're creating software or products, you want to appeal to different personality types because there's different personality types in the world. And you want to be able to appeal to everyone, not just the person who's, everything by the book. So yeah, I really have enjoyed having a side hustle. I have so many more friends and communities and different things that fulfill my life than if I just would have done one thing. It does take energy management and time management. And what I've been learning lately on my quest is you can have a scarcity or abundance conversation around energy and time as much as you can money. And I noticed that I was having a scarcity conversation around energy, like saying, I'm so tired all the time. Saying that is scarcity because our thoughts actually create our reality. So instead of saying,
Mhm.
I'm so tired, I can say, I have so much energy. This is amazing. I don't know where this energy is coming from. And then another thing that I've been working on, instead of being overwhelmed, be exhilarated. And overwhelm is an abundance problem. When you're overwhelmed, you have too many opportunities, too many people who want to see you, too much to do in so little time. That's better than sitting alone in a dark room watching the paint dry. That is,
Yeah.
really boring. So I would challenge your audience to switch your attitude of overwhelm to one of exhilaration.
Yeah, what I find is like when you put yourself out there with multiple sources, multiple sidelines, then I find life very invigorating.
Yeah.
And I first did is, well, can I handle doing 2 or 3 podcasts a night? Can I handle, doing a producer session with somebody overseas, 2 of those a night? And at first, when I first started doing that, I felt like, oh, I'm going to be overwhelmed. I can't do it. Right. And then I kind of limited myself. And then eventually I said, you know what? I like actually talking to people. I like actually that integration of work with somebody. It found it that it gave me energy. It didn't wear me out. Like I initially thought was like, oh, I'm gonna be so busy, I'm not gonna have time. And then, then I ended up like not watching Netflix and not doing things that were not productive. I actually started doing things that it's more exhilarating to talk to you or do a session or, have these things going on than to be sitting there just watching a tube. And saying like, "Oh, I'm not happy," okay, but I'm watching Netflix all day. It's like, well, it's better to be engaged with other human beings, and
It is.
then you find the energy came from being engaged.
Yeah, and we're not digging ditches, in this digital world, this in the online space. Like you said, we're just having conversations, and whoever has the most conversations wins in the digital space because your network is your net worth. And it's like if you really just talk to people, it's fun. And I believe that you can learn something from every single person that crosses your path. There's no accidents, mistakes, or coincidences. Everybody you talk to has something to teach you if you would just open your mind to figure out what it is. And then you think of it as a game like, wow, I wonder how my higher power is going to speak through me today. Who is he going to speak through? And what lesson am I going to get to my next step of spiritual growth and unfoldment?
Well, I think every time you talk to another human being, if you keep your mind open and you listen, what I've done with all these interviews is I've talked to people all over the world that I would have never got to talk to, and I get different perspectives. It's like an evolving education, evolving learning all the time.
Yes.
And I find it goes like multiple ways. It's in and out. Like I get ideas that affect my work, my software work, my music work, my poetry work, everything I do. It gets it's I kind of all expansive. And I call my record label Expansive Sound Experiments. The idea was like I don't want to be limited to one genre. And when I first did my podcast, I was like only talking to musicians. And I said, why don't I do it as an expansive idea? And I can talk to anybody. And then they said, well, you have to rename it. I said, no, I don't. I can just I'm still Phantom, and I'm like, I'm going to keep it the same name. And all you won't be successful doing that. You have to be very narrow. That's what some people were telling me. I said, well, that's what you think. but it seems like it didn't, it's working it out that if I have this idea that I can talk to anybody and have a discussion with people who have different ideas, different points of view, different walks of life, it's working. So I was like, well, he's like, maybe it's not your cup of tea, and that's fine, but it works for me.
Yeah, yeah, we're very aligned there. I don't want to just, life is short and it's not a dress rehearsal. And I don't want to just get in a rut. I don't want my life to be like the movie Groundhog Day, where every day is the same exact day. You start the day the same, do the same thing, end the day the same. And then before you know it, you're 65 or 70 years old and you're like, well, now I want to go travel and retire and have fun. And you realize you don't have as much energy and you just spent your whole life, in a cubicle or in rush hour, or, in an unfulfilling relationship. So I really encourage people to get outside their comfort zone and take that risk. Everything that you want in life is outside your comfort zone.
It's definitely like when I lived in Tokyo from 2004 to 2006. A lot of people in my family were like, "Oh, that's dangerous. Oh, you shouldn't do that. Or they won't like you." They gave me all kinds of reasons not to do it. And I was like, "Well, guess what? I'm doing it." and and it was just amazing experience. And it's like it was outside my comfort zone. I had to learn the language. I had to live there. To live there for 2 years, I was forced to learn, or I wasn't going to be able to get around. I had to tell the taxi driver where I wanted to go. I had to go to the grocery store and buy things. So it forces you when you go into another society, another culture, that if you want to survive, it forces you to learn. And I thought that was awesome. It was stressful initially, but the benefit was just amazing. And so I think people who push themselves out of their comfort zones, um, yeah, I mean, you have to be able to be resilient and be able to not have a crash. But I think a lot of times you can do it. You might not think you can, but you can do it.
Yeah, you can do more than you think you can, and people think it's an either or lifestyle, and it's a both and. Like you didn't have to choose between America or Japan. You got to live in both countries, and now you've experienced both cultures. Do you speak Japanese?
A little bit. I mean, I did it back in 2004, and when I was there, I used to, I was immersed in it. Since I haven't had been able to engage as much, I lost a lot of it. But like, if I got back into it, I'd probably pick it up
Yeah.
again. But like, I did have a sensei, and I would learn. I had to give my reports, and I had to get around, like I said, day to day life. And I was in the kind of point of view that I want to be able to tell the taxi driver where I want to go. I want to be able to go into a store. I went and got a motorcycle license and got passed the test and got a motorcycle. So I mean, I did things when I was there. I learned how to do it. But it's like I'm not there anymore, so I don't have the integration. But you kind of lose it if you don't use it. But yeah, it's just amazing what you can learn when you're in it. Like if you go to South America and you put yourself there, or you go to anywhere in the world, and you put yourself in there, and you're going to stay there, you're not going to leave in 2 weeks, you're going to learn. It's just a survival. You're going to figure out how to do it. Your brain will figure it out.
Oh yeah, definitely. And that's the same with time management. Like if there are more than one thing that you want to do in addition to your job, if you really want it bad enough, if you have a why that makes you cry, if you have a mission, you will figure out a way to do it.
So being magnetic, I know the law of abundance, and we've talked about it. Is that part of that law of attraction? Because it sounds like what magnetic seems like it's part of that. Then maybe we can talk about being magnetic. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, being magnetic means that you don't have to push yourself so much and exhaust yourself. And instead of going out and struggling and striving for your success and for your good, you are focused on having thoughts that are positive, having faith, speaking words of affirmation, and knowing that your good will find you. For example, Phantom, I don't know how we found each other. I didn't know you yesterday, but now we're having this connected conversation, and that is being magnetic. So I teach a lot about masculine and feminine energy. Masculine energy is competing, controlling, and conquering and pushing yourself. And feminine energy is being more receiving, receptive, available, and magnetic. And I teach women to do both. So I have a training called Elegant Warrior Training, where they're being magnetic and they're receptive to the good of the universe, but they're also being warriors, meaning they're going out there and they're taking action toward their goals and dreams. And I like to say that I'm in the action business and God is in the results business. It's okay to have big dreams and want things very badly. That's okay. That's part of being human. But then I cannot be attached to how it comes out because I'm not in control of anything but the actions I take. I'm not in control of outcomes. I'm only in control of actions.
That's interesting because I explored like in my music, like the feminine and the masculine. A lot of what I did when I first started, I created a character called Josephine Electric, and this whole idea of Phantom Electric Ghost is it's ghost. The idea is a band of ghosts was the concept. And so when I initially started it, I didn't like my male voice. So I used technology to, change the pitch of my voice, and I created a character called Josephine Electric. I had written a book, a short story about this female character, and then I made her come to life in my music, and it kind of got me on the map as a musician initially. And then I explored it with like using these different tools to change the pitch of my voice and create these ghost characters within my band. Is the band a collection of ghosts that they go around as a Phantom Electric Ghost is this electronic band that is actually phantoms that people think are they're musicians, but they're actually ghosts. That was the story. And it was able to explore things using this feminine voice that a male singer wouldn't do. I had stories and songs that had an approach that were not what a male singer would sing about. It would be what a female singer would sing about. So I was able to tackle topics that my male voice I would have different topics. So it gave me a really broad range. And I think it gave me this idea that you can kind of explore the fact that everybody has a feminine or male side if you think about it, and you can access that if you're willing to accept it.
Yes, everybody has both. I mean, we're really androgynous, and it's just where we choose to act from. We can act from our feminine side, and we can choose to act from our masculine.
Well, that was interesting when you were talking about how you could access kind of that in the last statement, a couple of statements you were talking about. You were showing women to access the kind of more side that maybe people would have thought was more male focused, but everybody has that ability to do that. Men can be more emotional and more understanding and less aggressive and actually more open if they're willing to access that and have conversations and not be in a narrow lane and actually be open to things that maybe they thought they couldn't be.
I think women are craving that from men. I mean, the women that I know really want men to be emotionally available and express their emotions and, be able to share themselves. Where, again, we're talking earlier in this interview about kind of the old paradigm where men could not show emotion and they had to always maintain their composure and they didn't want to like reveal too much of themselves or show vulnerability. I think it's the opposite. I think that women are craving men who are actually really, I'm not talking about being drama queens or drama kings. Like, I'm not talking about that kind of like wild emotional unmanageability. I'm just saying expressing how they really feel. That's one of the things that I really enjoy about my husband is I know exactly where I stand and exactly how he feels about me because he is expressive with me. And it's something that I hadn't experienced in other relationships. And it's different. And I really like that. I'm always like, wow, you're really expressive.
I think that's important. Like like I'm being an artist, what I think I tell songwriters is like, if you show me that vulnerability, if you show me that authentic self and you're not just putting on a show that you actually feel like there's you feel connected. Like when you hear a songwriter that feels like they're accessing something very personal,
Yeah.
then you feel like you're connecting because they're touching this universal thing because they're not scared or fearful to show you that vulnerability. And it's like any artist that's willing to go there, that's kind of like being an artist. I've always kind of drawn to people who are willing to do that. And I do that in my work. And so I kind of want to be around other people that do that and have conversations where we kind of go deeper than, oh, what's the sports team doing? What's the weather? Like we go deeper into it, than what most people want to talk about.
That's why people love art, because it helps, them drop into that side of their brain where they are passionate and they are feeling something. And, that's why people go to a rock concert, because they want to feel something on a really deep level rather than just they could listen to it on, their iPhone or something. But why do they go to a concert? They want to really feel it and they want a visceral experience. And yeah, I think art, life, people, if you share your passion, you're going to be magnetic.
Yeah, it's definitely important to have that kind of magnetic personality rather than something that's driving people away. Then you get this kind of anomie, isolationist kind of, resentment, and then you get bad behaviors. Because I was a sociology major, so I was kind of like caught up in Weber and anomie and all these ideas, and I kind of tried to put it in my music, having this understanding of the microcosm and the macrocosm of
Mm.
of like a macrocosm level, you can be affected by enemy, you're social isolated, and then you join some kind of group and you get into a riot, and then you study how a bunch of these people get into this riot situation because they felt like they were put upon, or they're resentful, or they have an issue, and then suddenly they have this crowd mechanism, and the crowd takes over, and then they lose control, even though everybody has control. But you start to study like how people get into these situations. And I thought it was very interesting from a sociological standpoint how that could happen, and then try to analyze how can you address that in your own life. How can you keep yourself from getting kind of off the rail and being going down the rabbit hole and going in a bad direction for yourself and for society, and understanding like you're not just one person, you affect that inner and outer, and there's like everything you do has an effect.
Yeah, well, it goes back to one of your earlier points about the Socratic method. You don't want to get swept up into a mob mentality. You want to keep your wits about you and ask questions like, what is really happening? Is this real? Like, what is the best thing for me? And to learn critical thinking.
Yeah.
What is me? What is my society? What is me? What is the media telling me? Like really keeping that true sense of self. And one of the reasons I love traveling to other countries is I got to see, wow, so much of my personality was like just culture. And I got to separate my true self, my spiritual self from my culture, and really learn about more who I was as a spiritual being having a human experience.
Yeah, because you can, if you kind of never get out of your own culture, like if you are staying with the Western culture, you stay within Eastern culture, you stay within whatever culture or philosophy that you were kind of born into, or you were in a small group of people and they didn't really get to experience other things. It's really insightful when you can get out of that paradigm, you can get out of that box and realize that there's other ways of thinking. There's
Yeah.
other ways of being. And, when I saw the Eastern philosophy versus Western philosophy, even though I studied it, but actually to be in it, it was like very eye opening, different perspectives on time, on, all kinds of factors. Time was a big thing, but there's just this totally different feeling when you're in a different culture, the different prioritization on different things. And maybe there's more groupthink, less individual think, is more understanding than other things. And you just like, wow, I can kind of look at this and see how I can make a decision. Do I want to embrace some of this? I don't have to go one way or the other. I can kind of look at everything.
Yeah, exactly. Which goes back to the 7 pillars of abundance. You want to live life holistically. You don't want to be just focused on money, 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 and let your health and your relationships go by the wayside. And you don't want to be obsessed with just one person and, then stop working out and taking care of yourself. Or you don't want to be a gym rat and not want to like have a job and, be able to pay your bills. You want to have all these areas of life firing, to live a truly balanced life.
I want to thank you for being on the program tonight. It's been very enlightening. I want people to remember that we do have your website up, and that'll be
Yeah.
fully clickable when we're published. And I thank you for being a guest on the Family Electric Ghost podcast. It was a really awesome conversation. And I encourage people to check that link. Like I said, it'll be fully clickable on whatever podcast platform you like to watch or listen to podcast on. And thank you for being, again, a guest on the Family Electric Ghost podcast.
You're so welcome. And when you go to that podcast, you'll be able to find, I'm sorry, when you go to my website, you'll find my podcast. There's a couple cool freebies on there for your listeners. They can find their magnetic and meaningful purpose. If they're not sure what kind of a side hustle to start, I have a free guide. I also have a really cool quiz to see where they're in and out of balance as far as the 7 areas go. And they can also book a breakthrough call with me. So just go to the website, Rebecca Elizabeth Whitman, Elizabeth with a Z.com, and we'll be in touch. And I can't wait to connect with you outside the show.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Thank you so much, Phantom.